Welcome to the Story Lab. I hope you enjoy this story. Let's begin. I pulled into our driveway, my heart racing. The nagging suspicion that had plagued me throughout my business trip refused to subside. Valerie's text message, clearly not meant for me, kept replaying in my mind. I took a deep breath, steeling myself for what I might find inside our home. As I stepped out of the car, the quiet of the neighborhood seemed oppressive. Our house stood silent, no signs of life visible from the outside. I inserted my key into the lock, the click echoing in the stillness. "Valerie?" I called out, my voice steady despite the turmoil inside me. No response. I moved through the house, my footsteps muffled by the plush carpet. The living room was empty, the kitchen untouched. A faint sound caught my attention, the gentle splash of water coming from the backyard. My hand hesitated on the patio door handle. Part of me wanted to turn back, to pretend I hadn't heard anything. But I couldn't. I had to know. I slid the door open silently, the warm evening air hitting my face. The splashing grew louder, accompanied by low murmurs and laughter. I stepped onto the patio, my eyes drawn to the jacuzzi. There they were. Valerie, my wife of 5 years, and Nicholas Bailey, her boss. Naked, intimate, oblivious to my presence. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. The betrayal hit me like a physical blow, leaving me winded. But as I watched them, something inside me hardened. The hurt transformed into a cold, calculating anger. I cleared my throat loudly. "Well, isn't this cozy?" Valerie's head whipped around, her eyes widening in shock. "Philip, you're home early." Nicholas had the audacity to smirk, his arms still draped around my wife's shoulders. "Harrington, this is awkward." I laughed, the sound devoid of humor. "Awkward? Is that what you call fucking my wife in my own home?" Valerie's shock morphed into defiance. She stood up, water cascading off her body, making no attempt to cover herself. "Oh, please, don't act so surprised, Philip. Did you really think your pathetic attempts in bed were enough to satisfy me?" Her words were meant to hurt, to emasculate, but I refused to give her the satisfaction of a reaction. Instead, I turned to Nicholas. "And you? I suppose screwing your employees' wives is a company perk?" Nicholas chuckled, standing up as well. "Come on, Harrington. You can't blame a man for taking what's offered, especially when it's so willing." I felt a surge of disgust, but I kept my face impassive. "You two seem to have forgotten something rather important." Valerie rolled her eyes. "And what's that, Philip? Your feelings?" I smiled, a cold, predatory expression that made both of them falter. "No, Valerie. The security cameras." Their faces paled simultaneously. I pulled out my phone, tapping the screen a few times. You see, I had a feeling something like this might be happening, so I installed some extra security measures. High-definition cameras, excellent night vision. They capture everything. Nicholas stepped forward, his arrogance replaced by panic. "Now, Harrington, let's not do anything rash." I ignored him, my finger hovering over the call button. "I wonder what your wife would think of this little show, Nicholas." Before he could respond, I hit call. The phone rang twice before Marion's face appeared on the screen. "Philip, is everything okay?" I turned the phone, giving her a clear view of the jacuzzi and its occupants. "I'm sorry, Marion, but I thought you should see this." Marion's gasp was audible, her eyes filling with tears. "Nicholas? How could you?" Nicholas lunged for the phone, but I stepped back, keeping it out of his reach. "Marion, I can explain." I ended the call, pocketing my phone. "I think she got the picture, don't you?" Valerie and Nicholas stood there, dripping and exposed, their arrogance shattered. I felt a grim satisfaction at their discomfort. "Philip," Valerie began, her tone suddenly conciliatory, "we can talk about this. It doesn't have to end our marriage." I laughed, the sound harsh and unyielding. "Oh, but it does, Valerie. It ended the moment you decided to betray me. I want you both out of my house. Now." Nicholas grabbed a towel, wrapping it around his waist. "You're making a mistake, Harrington. I can make your life very difficult." I met his gaze, unflinching. "Try it, Bailey. I dare you." As they scrambled to gather their clothes, I turned and walked back into the house. My hands were steady as I poured myself a drink. The ice clinked against the glass, a counterpoint to the sound of hurried footsteps and slamming doors. When silence fell again, I pulled out my phone and dialed a familiar number. Travis? It's Philip. I need your help. I stood in the kitchen, phone pressed to my ear, as Travis's concerned voice came through. Philip? What's going on? Valerie's been cheating on me, I said, my voice calm despite the storm raging inside me. With her boss, Nicholas Bailey. There was a sharp intake of breath on the other end. Shit, man. I'm so sorry. What do you need? I took a sip of my whiskey, savoring the burn. I need a friend, and I need someone who can think strategically. Can you come over? I'll be there in 20 minutes, Travis replied without hesitation. As I waited for Travis, I replayed the scene in the jacuzzi, analyzing every detail. The way Valerie had mocked me, the smug look on Nicholas's face. The doorbell rang, pulling me from my thoughts. I opened the door to find Travis, his face etched with concern. Philip, he said, pulling me into a brief, fierce hug. I can't believe this happened to you. I stepped back, gesturing for him to come in. Neither can I, but here we are. We settled in the living room, and I recounted the events of the evening. Travis listened intently, his expression darkening as I described Valerie and Nicholas's behavior. Those bastards, he muttered when I finished. What are you going to do? I leaned forward, my eyes meeting his. I'm going to destroy them, Travis. Both of them. And I need your help to do it. Travis nodded slowly, a glint of determination in his eyes. You've got it, man. Whatever you need. Just then, my phone buzzed. I glanced at the screen to see a message from Valerie. Philip, please. We need to talk about this. It was a mistake. I love you. I showed the message to Travis, who scoffed. She's got some nerve. Indeed, I agreed, typing out a response. There's nothing to talk about, Valerie. I'll be filing for divorce. Don't contact me again. I hit send and blocked her number in one swift motion. Travis raised an eyebrow. That's it? No dramatic confrontation? I shook my head. That's what she wants. A chance to manipulate me, to play the victim. I won't give her the satisfaction. Smart, Travis nodded. So, what's the plan? I stood up, pacing the room as I laid out my thoughts. First, we need information. I want to know everything about Nicholas Bailey, his finances, his business dealings, his dirty secrets. If he's willing to sleep with his employee's wife, I'm betting there's more dirt to be found. Travis pulled out his phone, his fingers flying over the keyboard. I know a guy, Shannon Hayes. She's a private investigator, best in the business. Want me to give her a call? Do it, I said. Tell her money's no object. I want everything she can dig up on Bailey. As Travis made the call, I continued planning. We'll need allies. Nicholas's other employees, perhaps. People he's screwed over in business deals. And Marion, his wife. She deserves to know the full extent of his betrayal. Travis ended his call, a satisfied smile on his face. Shannon's on board. She'll start digging first thing tomorrow. Excellent, I said, a cold smile spreading across my face. Now, let's talk about how we're going to use that jacuzzi footage. For the next few hours, Travis and I strategized, plotting out every move, every contingency. By the time he left, the sun was peeking over the horizon, but I felt more awake than ever. As I stood in the doorway, watching Travis drive away, a sense of calm settled over me. The pain of betrayal was still there, a dull ache in my chest, but it was overshadowed by a fierce determination. Valerie and Nicholas thought they could humiliate me, break me. They were about to learn how wrong they were. I closed the door, my mind already racing with the next steps in my plan. The game was on, and I intended to win. The house felt different now, tainted by the knowledge of what had transpired. I moved through the rooms, methodically gathering Valerie's belongings. Each item I touched fueled my anger, reminding me of her betrayal. My phone buzzed incessantly, messages from Valerie, Nicholas, even a few mutual friends who had somehow already heard the news. I ignored them all, focusing on the task at hand. As I was boxing up Valerie's clothes, the doorbell rang. I tensed. preparing for a confrontation. But when I opened the door, it was Marion standing there, her eyes red-rimmed and puffy. "Philip," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. I didn't know where else to go. I stepped aside, letting her in. "Come in, Marion. I'm sorry you had to find out like that." She nodded, moving into the living room and sinking onto the couch. "I always suspected, but I never wanted to believe it." I sat across from her, studying her carefully. "What are you going to do?" Marion straightened, a flicker of determination crossing her face. "I've already called my lawyer. I'm filing for divorce first thing Monday morning." "Good," I said, nodding approvingly. "You deserve better than that bastard." She looked at me, her gaze sharpening. "And what about you, Philip? What are you going to do?" I leaned back, a cold smile playing on my lips. "I'm going to make them regret ever crossing me." Marion didn't flinch at my words. Instead, she leaned forward, her voice low and intense. "I want in. Whatever you're planning, I want to help." I raised an eyebrow, reassessing her. Perhaps Marion had more steel in her than I'd given her credit for. This could get ugly. She nodded, her jaw set. "Nicholas doesn't get to walk away from this unscathed." There was a commotion outside. I moved to the window, peering out to see Valerie standing on the front lawn, shouting my name. "Philip, I know you're in there. We need to talk." I turned to Marion. "Looks like it's showtime." We stepped out onto the porch together, presenting a united front. Valerie's eyes widened when she saw Marion, then narrowed in anger. "What is she doing here?" Valerie spat. I ignored her question. "I thought I told you not to contact me again, Valerie." Valerie took a step forward, her voice taking on a pleading tone. "Philip, please. It was a mistake. I love you. We can work through this." I laughed, the sound harsh and unyielding. "Love me? You have a funny way of showing it. Was it love when you were fucking Nicholas in our jacuzzi? Was it love when you mocked me, called me pathetic?" Valerie flinched, her facade crumbling. I didn't mean those things. I was just—" "Save it." I cut her off. "I'm not interested in your excuses or your lies. You made your choice, Valerie. Now you get to live with the consequences." "What consequences?" she demanded, her tone shifting from pleading to defensive. "You can't do anything to me, Philip. It's your word against ours." I smiled, cold and predatory. "Oh, but it's not just my word, is it? There's video evidence, remember? How do you think your family will react when they see it? Your friends? Your colleagues?" The color drained from Valerie's face. "You wouldn't dare." "Try me," I challenged. "You seem to have forgotten who I am, Valerie. I'm not some pushover you can manipulate and discard. You want a war? I'll give you one." Marion stepped forward, her voice steady. "And he won't be fighting alone." Valerie looked between us, realization dawning in her eyes. For the first time, I saw fear there. "This isn't over," she said, but her voice lacked conviction. I nodded. "You're right about that. It's only just beginning." As Valerie retreated to her car, I turned to Marion. "Are you ready for this?" She nodded, a fierce light in her eyes. "More than ready. Let's make them pay." We went back inside, closing the door on Valerie's retreating figure. The pieces were falling into place, the stage set for what was to come. Valerie and Nicholas had no idea what was about to hit them, but they would. Soon, they would know the full extent of their mistake, and I would be there to watch them fall. 2 days after my confrontation with Valerie, I sat at my desk, phone in hand. Shannon Hayes' number glowed on the screen. I pressed call, determination coursing through me. "Mr. Harrington," Shannon's crisp voice answered. "I have some interesting findings for you." "I'm all ears, Miss Hayes," I replied, leaning back in my chair. "Nicholas Bailey isn't as clean as his public image suggests," Shannon began. "I've uncovered evidence of a fraud scheme from the early days of his career. He's gone to great lengths to hide it." My lips curled into a cold smile. "Excellent work. Can you send me all the details?" "Already on their way to your email," Shannon replied. "What's your next move?" "I have a few ideas," I said. "Keep digging. I want to know everything about his current dealings, too." After ending the call, I dialed Travis. He answered on the first ring. Philip, what's the latest? We've got dirt on Bailey, I said. I need you to reach out to some of his employees. Find out who's disgruntled, who he's screwed over. Travis let out a low whistle. You're not messing around, are you? They brought this on themselves, I replied, my voice hard. Are you still with me? All the way, Travis assured me. I'll start making calls. As I hung up, a knock at the door interrupted my thoughts. I opened it to find Marion standing there, a determined look in her eyes. I've been thinking, she said as she walked in. We need to hit Nicholas where it hurts most, his reputation. I gestured for her to continue as we moved to the living room. He values his image above all else, Marion explained, sitting down. What if we expose him? Not just to a few people, but to everyone? A slow smile spread across my face. What did you have in mind? Marion leaned forward, her eyes glinting. The jacuzzi video? We send it to his colleagues, his family, everyone. It's risky, I mused. We could face legal repercussions. Not if we do it anonymously, Marion countered. I know a tech whiz who can help us cover our tracks. I nodded, impressed by her initiative. All right, let's do it. But we need to time it right. Hit them when they least expect it. Just then, my phone buzzed with an email notification. It was from Shannon, containing all the details of Nicholas's fraud scheme. Marion, I said, looking up from my phone, how would you like to help bring down your soon-to-be ex-husband's career? Her eyes widened as I showed her the email. Is this for real? I nodded. Every word. And we're going to use it to destroy him. We spent the next few hours planning, our conversation punctuated by calls from Travis with updates on his progress. By nightfall, we had a solid strategy in place. Remember, I said to Marion as she prepared to leave, we need to be patient. Timing is everything. She nodded, a fierce look in her eyes. They won't know what hit them. As I closed the door behind her, I felt a surge of anticipation. The game was afoot, and I held all the cards. Valerie and Nicholas had no idea what was coming for them. I poured myself a drink and raised it in a silent toast. To revenge, served ice cold. Days turned into weeks as our plan unfolded. I threw myself into work, starting a new business venture with the inheritance from my late grandmother. It served as both a distraction and a means to further my revenge. One crisp morning, as I sat in my new office overlooking the city, my phone rang. It was Shannon. Mr. Harrington, she said, her voice tinged with excitement. I've got something big. I leaned forward, my interest piqued. What have you found? Remember that fraud scheme from Bailey's early career? Well, it never really stopped. He's been cooking the books for years, siphoning off company funds into offshore accounts. A slow smile spread across my face. Can you prove it? I've got documents, bank transfers, everything, Shannon replied. It's ironclad. Excellent work, I said. Send me everything you've got. As soon as I hung up, I called Travis. It's time, I said when he answered. We're ready to move. Travis's voice was filled with anticipation. What's the play? Anonymous tip to the authorities, I explained. Then we sit back and watch the fireworks. Later that day, I met Marion at a small cafe downtown. Her eyes were bright with excitement as I filled her in on Shannon's discoveries. So this is it? She asked, her voice low. We're really doing this? I nodded. Nicholas Bailey is about to have a very bad day. We spent the next hour going over the final details of our plan. As we were leaving, Marion grabbed my arm. Philip, she said, her voice serious. Thank you. For everything. I gave her a small smile. We're in this together, Marion. Until the end. The next morning, I woke early, adrenaline coursing through my veins. Today was the day. I made the anonymous call to the authorities, my voice disguised, providing just enough information to spark an investigation. Then, I waited. It didn't take long. By mid-afternoon, news broke of a major fraud investigation at Nicholas's company. I watched from my office as the story unfolded on every news channel. My phone buzzed with a text from Travis. It's happening. Bailey's being escorted out of the building by police. I allowed myself a moment of satisfaction before replying. Excellent. Time for Phase 2. Phase 2 was Marion's idea. While Nicholas was distracted by the fraud investigation, we would release the jacuzzi video. The timing was perfect, multiple blows, leaving no time for recovery. I called Marion. Are you ready? More than ready, she replied, her voice steady. Let's do this. With a few clicks, the video was sent anonymously to Nicholas's colleagues, family members, and several gossip websites. The fallout was immediate and devastating. By nightfall, Nicholas Bailey's life was in ruins. Arrested for fraud, publicly humiliated, his reputation in tatters. And it was only the beginning. As I sat in my living room, watching the chaos unfold on the news, I felt a sense of satisfaction. Valerie and Nicholas had thought they could break me. Instead, I had broken them. My phone rang. It was Valerie. What have you done? She screamed as soon as I answered. I don't know what you're talking about, I replied calmly. Don't play dumb, she hissed. I know this was you. The fraud investigation. The video, it has your fingerprints all over it. I laughed, the sound cold and mirthless. Prove it. There was a moment of silence on the other end. When Valerie spoke again, her voice was trembling. Philip, please. We can work this out. I'll do anything. Anything? I repeated, my voice hard. Then suffer, Valerie. Suffer like I did when I saw you with him. Suffer knowing that your actions led to this. And know that I'm just getting started. I hung up, cutting off her protests. As I set the phone down, I felt no remorse, no second thoughts. They had made their choices. Now they would face the consequences. The game wasn't over yet, but I was winning, and I intended to see it through to the bitter end. The weeks following Nicholas's arrest were a whirlwind of activity. As promised, I filed for divorce from Valerie, my lawyers armed with irrefutable evidence of her infidelity. She tried to fight it, of course, but her efforts were futile. One sunny morning, I sat across from my lawyer, Robert, as he laid out the details of the divorce settlement. She's asking for half of everything, Philip, Robert said, his tone disapproving. Despite the prenup, I leaned back in my chair, a cold smile playing on my lips. Let her try. Robert raised an eyebrow. You seem awfully calm about this. That's because I hold all the cards, I replied. Show her the evidence we've gathered. All of it. Robert's eyes widened as he flipped through the file I handed him. This is comprehensive. You want to use all of this? I nodded, my resolve unwavering. Every last bit. I want her to understand exactly what she's up against. Later that day, my phone rang. It was Robert. Well? I asked, already knowing the answer. She folded, Robert said, a note of awe in his voice. Accepted the original terms of the prenup without a fight. You'll keep the house, the majority of the assets. She's walking away with barely a suitcase. I allowed myself a moment of satisfaction. Excellent work, Robert. Let's finalize this as quickly as possible. As I hung up, a ping from my computer caught my attention. It was an email notification about a property sale. I smiled as I read the details. Everything was falling into place. The next day, I drove to a modest neighborhood across town. The house I pulled up to was small, a far cry from the luxury Valerie was used to. But it would be her new home now that she couldn't afford anything better. As I got out of the car, I saw her watching me from the window. Her eyes were red-rimmed, her face pale. Good. Let her suffer. I walked past her house to the one next door. A sold sign stood proudly in the front yard. My new property. Valerie came out onto her porch as I was inspecting the yard. What are you doing here, Philip? I turned to her, my face impassive. Why? I'm your new neighbor, Valerie. Didn't you hear? The color drained from her face. You can't be serious. Oh, but I am, I replied, my voice cold. I thought it would be nice to keep an eye on you. Make sure you're adjusting well to your new circumstances. She took a step towards me, her voice pleading. Philip, please. Haven't you done enough? I've lost everything. I met her gaze, unmoved by her tears. No, Valerie. You gave everything away. The moment you decided to betray me. This is simply the consequence of your actions. As I turned to leave, Valerie called out, her voice desperate. What about the house? Our house? Are you going to sell it? I paused, looking back at her with a cruel smile. Oh no, I'm keeping it. In fact, I'm thinking of installing a new jacuzzi. What do you think? The look of utter devastation on her face was all the response I needed. I got into my car and drove away, leaving Valerie standing there, broken and alone. As I headed home, I thought about the next phase of my plan. The billboard. It was extreme, perhaps even cruel, but as I remembered Valerie's mockery, Nicholas's smug face, I felt my resolve getting stronger. They had shown no mercy. Why should I? I pulled into my driveway, the house looming before me. Our house. My house now. As I walked inside, I felt a sense of peace settle over me. The ghosts of betrayal that had haunted these rooms were fading, replaced by the satisfaction of revenge well executed. My phone buzzed with a text from Travis. How'd it go with Valerie? I smiled as I typed my response. Perfectly. She's broken. But we're not done yet. Travis's reply came quickly. The billboard? The billboard, I confirmed. It's time to make sure they never forget what they did. As I set my phone down, I looked around the empty house. For the first time since that fateful night, I felt truly at peace. Valerie and Nicholas had tried to destroy me. Instead, I had risen from the ashes of their betrayal, stronger and more determined than ever. The game wasn't over yet, but I was winning, and I intended to savor every moment of my victory. The morning sun cast long shadows across my lawn as I stood on the porch, coffee in hand, watching the installation crew at work. The billboard was massive, dominating the space between my new property and Valerie's modest rental. As the workers hoisted the image into place, I felt a surge of cold satisfaction. Travis pulled up in his car, stepping out with a low whistle. Damn, Philip, you weren't kidding about going big. I turned to him, a smile on my face. Go big or go home, right? He joined me on the porch, eyeing the billboard. You sure about this? It's pretty intense. Absolutely, I replied without hesitation. They made their choices. Now they get to live with the consequences. As we watched, the crew finished securing the image. A high-resolution still from the jacuzzi video, Valerie and Nicholas caught in their moment of betrayal. Beneath it, in bold letters, remember this? How long before Valerie sees it, do you think? Travis asked. As if on cue, a scream erupted from next door. We turned to see Valerie stumbling out of her house, eyes wide with horror as she took in the billboard. Philip, she shrieked, storming towards us. What the hell is this? I calmly sipped my coffee. Good morning, Valerie. I see you've noticed the new addition to the neighborhood. She reached the edge of my property, face contorted with rage and humiliation. Take it down. Now. I'm afraid I can't do that, I replied coolly. You see, I own this property, and I can do whatever I want with it. You can't do this, she yelled, her voice cracking. It's illegal. Travis stepped forward, his voice calm but firm. Actually, it's not. We checked. As long as it's on private property and doesn't contain explicit nudity, it's perfectly legal. Valerie's eyes darted between us, desperation clear on her face. Philip, please. I know I hurt you, but this is too far. I set my coffee down, meeting her gaze with steel in my eyes. Too far? Was it too far when you mocked me in our home? When you betrayed our vows without a second thought? No, Valerie. This is exactly far enough. I'll sue you, she threatened weakly. I'll find a way to make you take it down. I laughed, the sound devoid of humor. Go ahead. Try. But remember, I have the full video. Push me, and I might decide the whole world needs to see it. The fight seemed to drain out of her then. She slumped, tears streaming down her face. Why are you doing this? Haven't I lost enough? Not nearly enough, I replied coldly. You took everything from me, Valerie. My trust, my love, my future. Now I'm taking everything from you. Your reputation, your comfort, your peace of mind. Fair is fair. She opened her mouth to respond, but I cut her off. Save it. I'm not interested in your excuses or your tears. You made your bed. Now lie in it. Every day when you look out your window, I want you to remember what you threw away. With that, I turned my back on her, walking into the house with Travis close behind. As I closed the door, I heard Valerie's sobs fade into the distance. Inside, Travis looked at me with a mixture of awe and concern. That was cold, man. Effective, but cold. I shrugged, pouring myself another cup of coffee. They brought this on themselves. I'm just making sure they never forget it. As we settled in the living room, my phone buzzed with a message from Marion. Just drove by. The billboard is wow. How's Valerie taking it? I smirked as I typed my reply. About as well as you'd expect. How are you holding up? Her response came quickly. Better than ever. Nicholas called yesterday, begging for another chance. I told him to enjoy prison. I showed the message to Travis, who grinned. Looks like your plan is working perfectly. It's not over yet, I said, my mind already racing with the next steps, but we're getting there, one day at a time. As Travis left, I stood by the window, watching Valerie's house. The billboard loomed over it, a constant reminder of her betrayal. I felt no pity, no remorse, only a satisfaction that justice was being served, cold and merciless. Let them suffer, I thought. Let them feel a fraction of the pain they caused me. This was my revenge, and I would savor every moment of it. Weeks passed, and the billboard became a local sensation. Despite Valerie's desperate attempts to have it removed, it stood firm, a daily reminder of her betrayal. I watched from afar as her life unraveled, piece by piece. One sunny afternoon, as I was leaving my office, I quite literally bumped into a woman carrying a stack of files. "Oh, I'm so sorry," she exclaimed as papers scattered across the floor. I knelt to help her gather them. No, it was my fault. I wasn't looking where I was going. As we stood, our eyes met, and I felt an unexpected jolt. She was beautiful, with kind eyes and a warm smile. "I'm Jacqueline," she said, extending her hand. "Philip," I replied, shaking it. "Philip Harrington." Her eyes widened slightly. The Philip Harrington? The one who exposed that huge fraud case? I nodded, a bit surprised by her recognition. "That's me." "Wow," she said, her smile widening. "I've been following that case. What you did was incredible." We ended up grabbing coffee, our conversation flowing easily. For the first time in months, I found myself genuinely enjoying someone's company. As we parted ways, Jacqueline hesitated. "This might be too forward, but would you like to have dinner sometime?" I was taken aback, memories of Valerie's betrayal flashing through my mind. But looking at Jacqueline's open, honest face, I made a decision. "I'd like that," I said, surprising myself with my sincerity. Over the next few weeks, Jacqueline and I grew closer. She was everything Valerie wasn't: kind, supportive, and genuinely interested in my thoughts and feelings. One evening, as we walked through the park after dinner, Jacqueline turned to me. "Philip, can I ask you something?" I nodded, curious. "The billboard. I know the story behind it. Are you okay?" I was silent for a moment, considering her question. "I am now," I finally said. "What Valerie and Nicholas did. It nearly broke me, but I refused to let them win." Jacqueline squeezed my hand. "You're incredibly strong. You know that? Most people would have crumbled." I looked at her, seeing only understanding in her eyes. "You don't think I went too far?" She shook her head. "They betrayed you in the worst way possible. They deserved everything they got." Her words warmed me, reinforcing my resolve. This was a woman who understood me, who supported me without question. As we continued our walk, I found myself opening up more, sharing details of my revenge that I hadn't told anyone else. Jacqueline listened intently, offering insights and support. "You know," she said as we reached my car, "what you've done. It's not just about revenge. You've exposed a criminal, brought justice to light. You should be proud." I pulled her close, feeling a surge of emotion. "Thank you," I murmured, "for understanding." As I drove home that night, I felt lighter than I had in months. Jacqueline's support had reinforced my belief in my actions. I had done what was necessary, what was right. And now, perhaps, I had found someone who truly understood and accepted me. The next day, I received a call from Marion. "Philip, I have news," she said, her voice filled with excitement. "What is it?" I asked, leaning back in my office chair. "I've been offered a job in New York," she said. "A fresh start, away from all of this." I smiled, genuinely happy for her. That's fantastic, Marion. You deserve it. I couldn't have done it without you, she said softly. You gave me the strength to stand up for myself, to demand better. As we talked, I realized how far we'd both come. From the broken, betrayed people we were, to this stronger, more resilient versions of ourselves. Will you keep the billboard up? Marion asked, a hint of mischief in her voice. I chuckled. Absolutely. It's become quite the local landmark, you know? We shared a laugh, the sound filled with the satisfaction of justice served and lives rebuilt. As I hung up, I looked out my office window at the city below. For the first time in a long time, I felt truly at peace. Valerie and Nicholas were paying for their betrayal. Marion was moving on to better things. And I had found someone who accepted me, darkness and all. This was my new beginning, forged in the fires of betrayal and tempered by the cold steel of revenge. And I wouldn't have it any other way. Months had passed since the billboard went up, and life had settled into a new normal. My relationship with Jacqueline was flourishing, my business was thriving, and the constant reminders of Valerie's betrayal had faded to a dull ache. One crisp autumn morning, as I sat in my home office reviewing contracts, my phone buzzed with an unfamiliar number. Mr. Harrington? A gruff voice asked when I answered. Speaking, I replied, curiosity piqued. This is Detective Roberts from the city police. We've got a situation involving Nicholas Bailey. He's demanding to speak with you. My blood ran cold. What kind of situation? The detective sighed. He's taken a hostage at the courthouse. Says he won't talk to anyone but you. I stood, already reaching for my keys. I'm on my way. As I drove to the courthouse, my mind raced. What was Nicholas playing at? He'd been sentenced to 15 years for fraud, with no possibility of parole. What did he hope to gain? The scene at the courthouse was chaos. Police cars, ambulances, news vans all crowded the area. As I approached the police line, Detective Roberts hurried over. Mr. Harrington, thank God you're here. Bailey's becoming more unstable by the minute. I nodded. What does he want? You, the detective said simply. He says he'll only release the hostage if you go in there. I took a deep breath, weighing my options. All right, I'll do it. The detective's eyes widened. Mr. Harrington, I can't ask you to put yourself in danger. I met his gaze steadily. You're not asking. I'm offering. This ends today. After a brief argument and a hastily signed waiver, I found myself being fitted with a bulletproof vest and a wire. Remember, Detective Roberts said as he checked the wire, we'll be listening. If things go south, use the code word checkmate, and we'll come in. I nodded, steeling myself for what was to come. As I approached the courthouse doors, I heard a familiar voice call out. Philip, wait. I turned to see Jacqueline pushing through the crowd, her face pale with worry. What are you doing here? I asked as she reached me. I heard on the news, she said, gripping my arms. You can't go in there. It's too dangerous. I cupped her face gently. I have to. This is my mess to clean up. She searched my eyes for a moment before nodding. Okay, but promise me you'll be careful. I promise, I said, giving her a quick kiss before turning back to the courthouse. As I entered the building, the eerie silence enveloped me. My footsteps echoed in the empty hallway as I made my way to the courtroom where Nicholas was holed up. I pushed open the door to find Nicholas pacing frantically, a gun in his hand. A terrified court clerk was huddled in the corner, eyes wide with fear. Nicholas, I said calmly, drawing his attention. He whirled to face me, his eyes wild. Harrington, you actually came. I spread my hands, showing I was unarmed. I'm here. Now let the hostage go. Nicholas laughed, a harsh, brittle sound. Oh, it's not that simple. You see, you've ruined my life. It's only fair I return the favor. I took a step closer, keeping my voice level. Your life was ruined by your own actions, Nicholas. The fraud, the affair, those were your choices. Choices, he spat. I had no choice. You think I wanted to cook the books? To risk everything? But I had to keep up appearances, to maintain the lifestyle Valerie expected. I felt a flicker of surprise. Valerie? What does she have to do with this? Nicholas's face twisted with bitterness. Everything. She was the one who pushed me to take risks, to cut corners. We deserve the best, Nicholas, he mimicked in a high-pitched voice. Think big or go home. I absorbed this information, pieces clicking into place. So the affair? Her idea, Nicholas said, deflating slightly. She said it would be exciting, add some spice to our lives. I was a fool to go along with it. I stepped closer, my mind racing. Nicholas, listen to me. I understand you're angry, but this isn't the way. Let the hostage go, and we can talk about this. For a moment, I thought he might comply. Then his face hardened. No, no more talking. It's time for action. He raised the gun, aiming it squarely at my chest. I tensed, ready to dive for cover. Checkmate, I said clearly, hoping the police were listening. Nicholas's brow furrowed in confusion. What? Before he could react, the doors burst open. Police flooded in, quickly disarming Nicholas and securing the hostage. As they led Nicholas away in handcuffs, he called out to me. This isn't over, Harrington. You'll pay for this. I watched him go, feeling a mix of pity and disgust. Even now, he couldn't take responsibility for his actions. Outside, I was immediately enveloped in Jacqueline's arms. Thank God you're okay, she murmured into my chest. I held her tight, the adrenaline of the situation finally catching up with me. Over her shoulder, I saw Valerie standing at the edge of the crowd, her face a mask of shock and guilt. Our eyes met, and in that moment, I knew she had heard everything. The truth of her role in Nicholas's downfall was out. As the police ushered us away for statements, I felt a sense of finality settle over me. This chapter of my life was truly over. Nicholas and Valerie had destroyed themselves, their lies and manipulations finally exposed. I looked down at Jacqueline, who smiled up at me with love and understanding in her eyes. This was my future now, a life built on honesty, trust, and mutual respect. The revenge that had driven me for so long was complete. Justice had been served, cold and ruthless, and I had emerged stronger, wiser, and ultimately victorious. As we walked away from the courthouse, leaving the chaos behind, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. The game was over, and I had won. This is where our story comes to an end. Share your thoughts in the comments section. Thanks for your precious time. If you enjoyed this story, then please make sure you subscribe to this channel. That would help me a lot. Click on the video you see on the screen, and I will see you there.